A little bit here. So first I'd like to thank a couple of people, Ms. Olson for giving me a ride yesterday, and Paul and Keith and everyone at NORML for having us out here. So besides Paul and myself, anybody here from Rhode Island? Anybody ever been to Rhode Island? Oh, we got some hands. Excellent. So, you know, it's a very nice state. We got some nice scenery and some great folks. And I'd say the biggest difference culturally between Rhode Island and California is it's our smallest state. Everybody pretty much knows everybody. It's the closest you can get to a small town as far as an American state goes. So when it comes to the issue of medical marijuana, people didn't really want to talk right away. There's a certain social stigma, especially on the East Coast, that you don't have as much here on the West Coast, against people who use marijuana because of the drug education that we were all given and the American government's propaganda, that this is an evil drug and that no one should use it. So when we came to the issue of medical marijuana, we were facing a double stigma in recruiting patients to speak out, asking people who were already stigmatized as people suffering from chronic, severe, debilitating illnesses who also use an illegal medication. And this was, at first, a very big challenge, but as we broke through different hurdles in the legislative process, it became better and better for us to ask patients to speak out and make a difference, and that's how we got our law passed. So I'll break it down for you a little bit. Besides Rhode Island being different from California in terms of social perceptions of marijuana use, there's also big differences in our Medical Marijuana Act. California's law back from 1996 and amended more recently allows for all sorts of things that we haven't got yet. For instance, the list of qualifying medical conditions in the Rhode Island law, which is called the Edward O. Hawkins and Thomas C. Slater Medical Marijuana Act, does not include any psychological conditions or many of the different things that you see here at this conference. We are only talking about AIDS, cancer, glaucoma, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, Crohn's disease, chronic pain, cachexia or wasting, severe nausea, and not quite all the things that apply here in California. Also, we have no dispensaries. There's no way for patients to cooperate for the distribution of medicine. People are expected to grow their own or to appoint a caregiver or to buy it on the black market, which we know can be dangerous for someone who's already suffering from a terrible medical illness. So in Rhode Island, you can grow up to 12 plants as a patient or possess up to 2.5 dried ounces of marijuana. You can appoint up to 2 primary caregivers to help you with that. They can also grow up to 12 plants. Or if they have multiple patients, up to 5, they can grow 24 plants. And all these protections apply as long as you're in possession of your Rhode Island State Department of Health issued medical marijuana patient license card. Every patient has to have a card issued by the state in order to participate in the program, and that's achieved by asking your doctor to sign an application form, sending in that signature along with $75 or $10 if you're on Medicare, Medicaid, SSI, SSDI. So how did this happen? How did we get here? So I can give you a bit of our RIPAC story. So we're RIPAC, Rhode Island Patient Advocacy Coalition, and this all got started for us back in 2003. We'd had a legislature that had introduced a Medical Marijuana Act a couple of times in a row, but hadn't actually done anything with it. The bill had never seen any sort of hearings or testimony or committee attention whatsoever. So 2003, the chapters in Rhode Island of Students for Sensible Drug Policy decided that it was completely unconscionable that patients could be arrested for smoking marijuana. Put together a big conference, the Medical Marijuana Symposium at Brown University, where I was a student at the time, and there were attendees from all of our neighboring states, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, were all represented by patients and advocates and legislators, and kind of got people talking. We had a press conference where people got pretty excited about how we could get more involved in the medical marijuana movement. And then later that year, we had a discussion among some of our activists about how we could really capitalize on the momentum of this conference, the Medical Marijuana Symposium we did. And it was a very personal issue. Within our small group of activists, a friend of mine, Tom, has a mother, Rhonda, who suffers from multiple sclerosis. And Rhonda suffers terrible spasticity as a part of her condition and would not smoke marijuana on the grounds that she could be arrested. And This was a very understandable concern. Marijuana is illegal in America. What could we do about it? So we decided that the best way to help patients would be to pass a statewide medical marijuana act for Rhode Island. And we figured that we, as student activists at the time, wouldn't be able to do this unless we had more community support. So we called up the ACLU of Rhode Island and we said, do you support medical marijuana? And they said, yeah, of course, that seems obvious. And then we said, well, we're now a coalition. The Rhode Island Patient Advocacy Coalition was born. It was no longer just SSDP, we had the ACLU on board. So from there, we started gathering the endorsements of other respected local organizations. And by 2004, we were ready to go at our first attempt for legislative bill. We recruited some new sponsors, put in a bill. This was our first moments of patient testimony as we recruited people who were willing to come forward, speak about how they either were illegally using marijuana and fearing arrest, or suffering and hoping to benefit from the medical use of marijuana under a legal state program. We did this with the support of the Marijuana Policy Project and got an actual committee hearing in the State House where patients did get to come down and testify, tell their stories, and this was our first moment of really getting legislators involved in our effort. The bill did not actually pass out of committee to any floor votes that year, but then we came back 2005, and this was our big moment to shine because we picked up some even more powerful sponsors, and our committees actually passed the bill to the floor. Both the House and Senate of Rhode Island passed the 2005 Medical Marijuana Act. It was then vetoed by Republican Governor Kachiri under pressure from the White House, and then sort of sat dormant over the winter time while the legislature was home for recess. And then January 3rd, 2006, we came back and watched the override vote. Sure enough, we had a law, the Rhode Island Medical Marijuana Act. And this was, of course, a very big deal for us and had the one big drawback of the sunset clause. In 2005, some of the more hesitant legislators had decided on a compromise, a legislative deal whereby we were given 2 years to have a law, and then 2 years after that, which was going to be June 30th, 2007, the law was scheduled to expire. Unless we could amend the law to make it permanent, all of these protections for patients would just go away, and the people who were using marijuana medically legally in our state would be criminals yet again. So, in order to fix this up, we began mounting a whole new legislative attempt. It was apparent that now that there was a group of patients out there who had been issued cards, we were going to be able to make much more of a difference, so we incorporated the Rhode Island Patient Advocacy Coalition as a Rhode Island nonprofit and applied eventually successfully for federal 501c3 status as well, became a registered nonprofit group. After I graduated, I came on as executive director, along with all the same volunteers that we'd been working with so far at that point. And then we mounted a whole new campaign. We put up a website. You can all visit ripatients.org to visit and learn more about what we're doing. We put together presentations for local groups to increase the size of our coalition and get more local support for our bill, and started bringing on more patients. People who were, given the Department of Health's registration card and told, okay, you can use marijuana now. Well, where do I get it? How do I use marijuana? What is marijuana? So that's where we stepped in. The Department of Health didn't really want to talk about what marijuana might be or why it was good medically, so RIPAC was happy to provide that information. We started putting together patient meetings, which is how I met one fellow, Bobby, who suffers from HIV, AIDS, and experiences terrible neuropathic pain from AIDS as well as a spinal injury he suffered earlier in life, and came to us saying, well, I've been using marijuana and now it's legal, which is great, but I don't have anywhere to go get marijuana. I went down to South Providence and found a drug dealer and he beat me up and took my money. How do I get marijuana safely? And we all agreed that was a terrible story and decided that Bobby would do best to make a difference by coming to testify at our legislature. So we began putting together hearings, again with the support of the Marijuana Policy Project and a local lobbying firm, the Bradford Group, and we submitted